all terrestrial life avoids going out of existence, non-existence, including the human species. But something peculiar happens to humans. Humans, like all other human life, avoid going out of existence, don't want to die. But humans want to live forever. Needs to wants. Think about that. Humans desire immortality. To live forever. Immortality. Patterns, designs, immortality. Our poor little friend Butters puts these two ideas together and says, what am I going to call it? I'll call it God. The next morning, Stan, Kyle, and Wendy are walking into or out of our village, chatting among themselves, completely oblivious to poor little Butters, when suddenly they're pelted by rocks and sticks and feces being flung at them from none other than Butters. And so, of course, they look over and say, "Oh, what are you doing? Moreover, who are you?" And Butters, obviously, understandably, responds, "Aha! I don't expect you to know who I am. In fact, here I am, half-naked, starving outside the village on the road. You don't know me. You don't care about me. No one else in the village seems to care about me. I've fallen through the cracks in these your systems that you've created. But that's okay. That's all right. Because, while I'm out here, I've had time to think, reflect, and I figured it out. I know what you're doing. And that's okay. At this point, I don't expect you to do anything to help me. But that's okay. Because I now realize that someday God's gonna get you. God's gonna get you. Stan, Kyle, and Wendy look at each other. And it suddenly dawns on them. The same idea Butters had. And they say, "That's brilliant. Yes, there is a greater, more perfect pattern maker, designer that is immortal, that's given rise to all of this. Indeed, you're right, Butters. Someday, wink, wink, God's gonna get us. Why don't we turn that into a system?" And indeed, every human civilization has since the dawn of time. The ancient Romans called this system, in Latin, religio. Religio, which looks and sounds like what in English? Religio, with an N on the end. Religion. What does the word mean? It's two words in Latin. Ligio, ligare, to bind, to shackle, to chain. Re, again, to bind, to shackle, to chain together again and again and again. What? To bind together again what? You, us, members of human society. Notice that this is the last of the three systems to emerge, to develop. Yet, as we will learn throughout these courses, it will be the system which winds up manipulating directly or indirectly being manipulated to control all of the others. Wow. Okay. So that is so much for our initial paradigms, models for how human societies form, starting with needs based on religious symbolism and moving to wants and how these various systems in human societies develop. That leads us then to the second big word on your outlines and worksheets, hermeneutics. In English, it's spelled hermeneutics. Hermeneutics. From another Greek word, Hermes, the messenger god in the ancient Greeks. Hermes, right? Message, signpost, a mile marker. Better way to think of this big word is methodologies. Again, if we're not just talking about spirituality, but there's something actually material, concrete that we can analyze in these courses, this material, then there should be a structure to assist us in that process. We should be able to have different methods, ways, hermeneutics of analyzing different things. And indeed we do. For our purposes in these courses, we have no less than 5. The first one, the most important one. Philological. The philological hermeneutic. Philology. What in the world does this word mean? Better yet, what is in a word? Ha ha ha. The answer is often in the question. What is in a word indeed? Philological, not philosophical, philological. 2 words from ancient Greek. Second half first. Logical, log, from the ancient Greek word logos, L-O-G-O-S, which the ancient Romans translated and understood in Latin as ratio, R-A-T-I-O, ratio in English. What is a ratio? If something is a ratio, it means it's based on, or rational, it means it's based on another R word, reason. Log, logos, ratio. Logical, rational principle, reason. Logical, rational principle, reason. Okay, it's one thing if I have a logical, rational principle, reason in my mind, but if it's important, I want to transfer it from one mind into another. How do I do that? Through communication. How do I communicate? Well, I could use glyphs, emojis, though that's rather problematic in a more developed human civilization. humans use actual words. The communication of logical, rational principles, reason, via words. In other words, what does a word really mean? And this is so important. First half of the word, the philo part, philological, philo. Ancient Western philosophy was invented where? Hint, same place as French fries, Greece. Okay. So, Western philosophy was invented in Greece, let's just say the 8th century BCE. And the ancient Greeks had nothing better to do with their time than sit on riverbanks and sip wine and eat olives, which caused them to think more or less lucidly. And as they thought, they said, why do we have one word for something when we can have several? For example, what is another word in English for love? Like, admire, respect. I really admire you, baby. I don't think that's gonna put a ring on it, as you kids say. No, there is no other word in English for love than love. Well, the ancient Greeks had 3, at least. Number 1, eros, E-R-O-S, which in English looks like erotic, an immediate attraction. It's almost primeval. An immediate attraction, love. The Greeks considered it a form of love, okay? Eros. Number 2, which brings us to the philological hermeneutic now. Philia, P-H-I-L-I-A, philia, as in pedophilia. Pedos in Greek means child. What about this philia? The city of Philadelphia. Adelphos, Philadelphia. Adelphos in Greek means brother, city of brotherly. Philadelphia, brotherly love. Philia. For the ancient Greeks, this is a deeper, more intimate love of the other. Quite simply, it's the love presumably shared between best friends, partners, husband, wife, or whatever, family members, depending on the degree of dysfunctionality in one's particular family, but a deeper, more intimate love of the other. Okay? Philia. So we already now know what philology means. The deeper, more intimate love of logical, rational principles, reason, communicated via words. The deeper, more intimate love of logical, rational principles, reason, communicated via words. In other words, what is in a word? What does a word really mean? Because once we understand what a word really means, it immediately, exponentially expands our horizon, our understanding. We suddenly not only understand and know what we ourselves are thinking, we more accurately and precisely are able to communicate that to others. So, hermeneutic number one, methodology number one, the philological philology. Okay. Since I brought it up, I said there's three words the ancient Greeks had for this concept of love. The third is agape, or agape. Agape, A-G-A-P-E, agape, or agape. Made famous by the early Christians. A lot of time if people have heard of this term, they think it's the early Christians invented it. They did not. The ancient Greeks already understood this concept. It's self-sacrificial love, self-sacrificial love, the love of heroes, giving one's very own life up for the sake of the other. Plenty of ancient Greek and Roman myths that express this idea, okay? All right. That leads us to our second hermeneutic. As the ancient Greeks are sitting on the river banks, eating olives, sipping wine, and thinking and coming up with a vocabulary, it becomes almost obsessive with the Greeks. That is, they, believe it or not, crazy idea, they actually like learning. How do we know? What is knowing? What is knowledge? How do we know what we think we know? Second hermeneutic, second methodology, the epistemological. You now already know what half of this word means. There it is again, logical, logical, rational principles, reason. Something to do with that, once again. First half of the word, epista, from the ancient Greek word pisteuein, P-I-S-T-E-U-E-I-N, pisteuein. And the Greeks, why have one word for something when you can have several? The ancient Greeks had two words for knowledge, to know. Right? The first, gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, not to be confused with Nonna's favorite winter Sunday dish, gnocchi. No, gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, gnosis. Factual knowledge. I know that Butters is a student in this course. It's a fact. Gnosis. The second type of knowledge, pisteuein. Maybe by the end of the course, Butters and I will get to know each other so well that we'll share a beer at a bar, right? Pisteuein, a deeper, more intimate knowledge of the other. Again, a knowledge presumed to be an essential part of a more meaningful human relationship. Pisteuein, okay? So epistemological, a deeper, more intimate knowledge of logical principles, reason, and their communication via words. In other words, approaches to knowing. How do I know what I know? How do I know what I think I know? And over the past several centuries, certainly in the West, philosophers have come up with two different approaches to knowing, which in Latin, two Latin phrases, a priori and a posteriori. A posteriori, a priori. A Latin preposition meaning by means of. A, sometimes ab, ab. In this case, a. A posteriori, a priori. Posteriori, chop off the I at the end. What do you have? Posterior. Where's your posterior? You're sitting on it. Knowing a by means of posteriority, things behind, things after the fact, later things. Today we would say probably this is the stuff of empirical knowledge, something that can be demonstrated in a scientific laboratory. You can make an hypothesis, perform experiments, make observations, draw conclusions, a posteriori, factual empirical knowledge. The second approach to knowing, a priori, chop off the I at the end, prior. If something is prior, where is it? It's before. By means of things before, things having come before. First things, first principles, a priori. This approach to knowledge, this realm of knowledge, if we wish to call it that, has to do with all of those abstract concepts that not just Western philosophers, but human beings have been debating, discussing around the campfire or in university classrooms for millennia. Abstract concepts like justice, beauty, good, evil, wrong, right. Cannot prove them, much less experiment on them, at least not yet, in a scientific laboratory, so no a posteriori knowledge. But they're concepts that across the board, even among cultures that have never encountered one another throughout history, most, never generalize, maybe not exactly all, but pretty much most, have these ideas and debate and discuss these ideas. Right? Again, the problem being that they're not, according to more contemporary scientific standards, actually knowable, practically speaking, testable in a laboratory. But it gives philosophers a salary. Okay, so a priori. So a posteriori, a priori knowledge, approaches to knowing things, the epistemological, hermeneutic. In these courses, we're going to be handling and dealing with both at times, separately and sometimes simultaneously. Now, this leads us to our third hermeneutic. What is the most a priori, first thing, most abstract concept that you could perhaps imagine, come up with, think of? Beauty, freedom, liberty, authority. God. Think back to Butters. God. The most, par excellence, abstract a priori concept anyone, philosophers agree, can imagine, can conceive. And that brings us to our third hermeneutic, the metaphysical. The metaphysical. Another Greek word, physis. This is the physical part. Physis in Greek means nature. Meta, Greek adverb meaning beyond. Beyond nature. Beyond the natural, beyond the physical, the metaphysical. That's where all these abstract concepts and ideas ultimately exist. The pinnacle of which, the height of which, the divine, God, or the gods. and more specifically for our purposes in these courses, the metaphysical approaches to the divine, approaches to the gods or God. And there are 5. Number 1, agnosticism. Agnosticism. You already know what half of this word means. There it is again, gnosis, agnosticism. So we are talking something regarding to do with factual, empirical knowledge, yeah? In this case, that letter A, is not Latin, it's a Greek participle, we call it, of negation, meaning no or not. Agnosis, agnosticism, no factual knowledge. I have no empirical data, or at least not enough, to make a determination whether or not there is or is not a divine. Agnosticism. I don't know, which is considered to be kind of a cop-out by the second adherents of the second approach to the divine, namely atheism or atheism. You already know what half this word means. Negation, not something. What? Theism, from the Greek word theos, T-H-E-O-S, theos, meaning God, the divine. There is no divine. There is no gods or God. There is no divine. More recently, the late, and in my humble opinion, great, publicist, essayist Christopher Hitchens coined a third term, anti-theism, anti-theism. You already know what half of this word means. Theism, the divine, God. Anti, Latin term, Greek and Latin term, meaning against. In other words, even if there were a divine, it's a bad idea. It's better that no such a thing, reality, exists. As Christopher Hitchens used to famously say, it would be like living in North Korea, except when you die in North Korea, you get out. In the case of God, it's forever. Okay, so anti-theism. It's a bad idea if there is such a thing as the divine. That leaves us with the last 2. And now these are the most important for our purposes, especially in these courses. Deism with a D, D-E-I-S-M, and theism with a T-H, T-H-E-I-S-M. Theism, you already know. If atheism is no divine, theism is the proposal that there is a divine. What is deism then? Deism with a D, from the Latin term deus, D-E-U-S, meaning God. Okay, well, if theism, the Greek theos, T-H-E-O-S, also means the divine or God, then what's the difference? Well, philosophers over the past few centuries have made this distinction. Deism proposes that there is indeed, back to our friend Butters, looking for patterns, desire for immortality. Deism suggests that there is a divine intelligence that has given rise to everything, and it ends there. Creator. Deism. Theism literally requires a leap of faith, because theism suggests not only is there a divine intelligence, creator, which has given rise to everything, but that this divine intelligence is also a personal being that gets involved with its own creation.